This is Julian Darley for Global Public Media, and I'm talking to Richard Heinberg about the vexing question of American gasoline prices. Richard, there is much press reporting in the American press, about the very high gasoline prices that we're seeing now at the end of May 2007. Can you tell people a little bit more about why they're so high and and some of the reasons that are not the right reasons?
Well, maybe I can start with the end of your question. There are a lot of folks who are saying, well, this is price gouging by the oil companies. And it's hard to say whether there might be a bit of element of that. And I don't want to sound like an apologist for the oil industry, because certainly they bear an enormous responsibility for the overall situation that we're in. However, I think it's simplistic and really not very helpful to frame the situation in that way, because what's really happening is just a matter of supply and demand. I mean, gasoline in storage is at record lows for this time of the year. We're importing more finished gasoline because even though American refineries have been expanded to process more fuel, the fact is Americans are using more gasoline. Demand is up. So we're in a classic situation where there are more people wanting to buy the product than there are who want to sell it, so price is inevitably going to go up. And the thing that really is the take-home message from all of this is that these high prices are not something that's going to go away once this driving season is over and we get back to some kind of normal condition. There is no more normal. We've all been living in a fool's paradise of cheap gasoline, cheap oil for the last several decades, and that's coming to an end. We've seen probably the all-time peak in supply of regular crude oil probably occurred in May 2005, gradually declining global supply of conventional oil, and as time goes on, that's going to result in higher and higher prices. We're seeing here in California gasoline prices slightly above $3.50 a gallon. Probably this season we'll see $4 a gallon gasoline, and if there's hurricane activity in the Gulf of Mexico, we may see $5 a gallon gasoline prices. It's going to be painful. It's going to get people's attention. In the long run, I think it's actually a good thing that it gets people's attention, because this is a structural problem of our way of life. And it's not going to be solved by finding some bad guys somewhere to blame, even if they are indeed bad guys at one level or another. The fact is we're all complicit. We've invested in a way of life with our expectations and our habits, a way of life that really has no future. We have to change those expectations and habits. It's not just a matter of putting it all off onto the oil companies.
Now, one of the issues which is valid for many poorer people, and perhaps increasingly even some middle-class people, is the idea that there's a huge social justice issue of this, that people who've built their lives around gasoline costing, let's say, $2 a gallon and so forth.
Or
and
a dollar a gallon.
Or a dollar,
not that long ago.
Or even indeed less than a dollar a gallon, so they live a long way from where they work, and maybe that's for all kinds of other reasons, and it wasn't what they wanted to do, but they have to in order to stay alive and have somewhere for themselves to live and their children and so forth. Many people's lives are very strung out, very stretched out, and there seems little doubt that those who are poorer are going to be much more badly affected by this, and they have much less room to maneuver. And then, of course, there's the fact that many people are very maxed out on their credit cards and so forth. Do you have some thoughts, some comments about this difficulty of saying, look, this isn't going away, it's no point in just pointing fingers at some corporations who do have don't have a perfect track record in many respects. What does one say about this social justice issue?
Well, two things. One is that the oil companies ultimately do have a responsibility to use their enormous profits that they're seeing now for the benefit of society as a whole. At least to use those profits to help society make the transition away from fossil fuels And these energy companies need to themselves transition away from fossil fuels to renewable energy. But the other side of it is that the government is going to have to take some responsibility in helping people to adjust to these higher prices. We will see fuel rationing in the future, one way or the other. The way we're headed now is toward price rationing. In other words, supply, demand, and price will, in effect, ration the available fuel. If it's not as much as people would like to have, that'll just mean that the price will rise to the point where many people will be priced out of using it. And that's a very inefficient and cruel way to ration a scarce and necessary, at this stage of the situation, resource. A much better way would be to implement a kind of quota rationing, which we had during World War II. It worked very well, gas rationing. And there are a number of different schemes out there that are being proposed for quota rationing. And I can't say that I'm a particular proponent of this one as opposed to that one. But clearly the government is going to have to start looking into this and seeing what will be the most fair, efficient, and effective way of rationing the available supply so that folks who really need that fuel in order to keep their lives on track will have the bare minimum that they need.
And to finish up with, another very important issue for very many people, and an increasing number of people now, is that of climate change, in Britain sometimes called climate chaos,
Yes.
global warming. One of the mechanisms which is proposed to help reduce the amount of carbon that's burned and emitted in carbon dioxide is some kind of gasoline or petrol tax. And yet, when this is tried or even suggested, there's usually a fairly loud ballyhoo against it. But if gasoline prices in the US, for instance, are reaching these historic highs, what chance do you think there is of politicians being able to bring in a tax on top of the already apparently high gas prices?
Unfortunately, I think it's a very, very low chance here in the US. Americans don't like taxes. Now, historically, they've been taxed very little for their fuel as compared to people in other countries, and that's why Europeans have been paying $5 a gallon for gasoline for some time, and they hear Americans complaining about $3 a gallon gasoline, and they go, well, you know, what's going on here? Well, yes, as the stuff gets more scarce, then a good solution would be to tax it and then use the tax money to help with the creation of public transportation infrastructure and to help poorer people to be able to afford what they absolutely need and so on. That would make perfect sense. But politically, I think it's a non-starter in the U.S. And so therefore, I think probably some form of quota rationing is going to be much more palatable, much more politically likely to see the light of day.
Thank you very much. For Global Public Media, this is Julian Darley.